February 6, 1958, a day that started with hope and ambition ended in unimaginable tragedy. This is the story of the Munich Air Disaster, a heartbreaking event that changed football forever.
It was a terrible, terrible experience. And I remember my feelings when I did come to a bit of sanity and realized the whole situation. And the last thing I thought at the time would be that I'd never be associated with football again. That was out. That was definitely out.
To understand the tragedy, we need to travel back to the 1950s. Manchester United, led by manager Matt Busby, was one of the most exciting teams in football. Known as the Busby Babes for their young talent, they were a symbol of hope and ambition. They had just qualified for the European Cup semi-finals after a tough match against Red Star Belgrade. On February 6, 1958, the team, along with staff, journalists, and fans, boarded British European Airways Flight 609 in Munich for their journey back home. The mood was joyful. They were one step closer to European glory, but the weather in Munich was terrible. Snow was falling heavily and the runway was covered in slush. At 3 or 4 p.m., the plane tried to take off for the first time, but the pilots noticed a problem.
Sorry about that. Engine fluctuating.
609, we are abandoning the takeoff.
Tower, please say again.
We are abandoning the takeoff.
The engine was overveering. They aborted the takeoff and returned to the terminal. Passengers were reassured and the crew checked the engines. At 3:19 p.m., they tried again. This time the plane struggled to gain speed because of the slush on the runway. The pilots aborted the takeoff once more, narrowly avoiding disaster. At 3:31 p.m., against the advice of some crew members, the pilots decided to try a third takeoff. This decision would prove fatal. The plane failed to gain enough speed, skidded off the runway, and crashed into a house. The impact tore the plane apart, scattering debris and fuel across snow. The crash claimed 23 lives, including 8 Manchester United players: Geoff Bent, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Duncan Edwards, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor, and Liam Whelan. Club staff and journalists also lost their lives. Duncan Edwards, one of the football's brightest talents, died from his injuries 15 days later. Among the survivors were manager Matt Busby, who was seriously injured, and a young Bobby Charlton, who would go on to become one of football's greatest legends. The tragedy left Manchester United in ruins, but under Busby's leadership, the club began to rebuild. Just 10 years later, in 1968, Manchester United won the European Cup, dedicating their victory to the memory of those lost in Munich. The Munich Air Disaster remains one of the darkest days in football history, but it's also a story of resilience and courage. Every year on February 6th, Manchester United and its fans honor the memory of the Busby Babes. Their legacy lives on, and a reminder of the strength of the human spirit in the face of tragedy.